Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Love series. Buckle up, you guys, because today we're diving deep into a case that gripped Mumbai back in 2017, the murder of fitness trainer Rohit Kaushik. It's a story that played out against the backdrop of Mumbai's glamorous fitness scene and quickly spiraled into a twisted tale of ambition, jealousy, and a brutal crime. To guide us through the complexities of this case, I brought in an expert who can help us understand not just the what, but the why, the deep-seated human emotions that can drive someone to such extremes.
It's always intriguing to explore how seemingly ordinary lives can take such dark turns in this case, with its blend of ambition, passion, and ultimately violence, offers a unique window into the darker side of human nature.
So let's start by setting the scene. Picture a high-end gym in South Mumbai, where sculpted bodies and fierce determination are the norm. Our victim, Rohit Kaushik, was just 28. But already a rising star in this competitive world. He had it all: the looks, the charm, the expertise, even a growing clientele of Bollywood celebrities. Success seemed to come naturally to him, but as we often see, success can breed envy, even within those closest to us.
Yeah, that's true. When someone achieves a certain level of success, especially in a field as image-conscious as fitness, it can trigger a complex mix of emotions in those around them, admiration certainly, but also potentially resentment and a sense of inadequacy.
And in this case, that resentment seems to have been brewing right under Rohit's nose. Another trainer at the gym, Aditya Mehra, harbored a deep jealousy towards him, fueled by both professional rivalry and a personal grudge. You see, both Rohit and Aditya had their eyes on Priya Singh, a talented and ambitious trainer who was also part of this tight-knit gym community. Imagine the tension in the air, the palpable animosity, the unspoken competition, the simmering jealousy, all playing out against the backdrop of clanging weights and high-intensity workouts.
Workplace dynamics can be tricky, especially in environments where ambition and personal relationships intersect. It's a recipe for complicated emotions and blurred lines, and when those emotions aren't addressed in a healthy way, things can spiral out of control.
And in this case,
Yeah.
they did. On a fateful night in May 2017, Rohit's body was found in the gym's locker room, brutally stabbed multiple times. It was a chilling discovery. That sent shockwaves through the entire fitness community.
The sheer brutality of the attack speaks volumes. This wasn't just about eliminating a rival, it was about inflicting pain, releasing a pent-up rage that had likely been festering for some time.
And the evidence quickly pointed to Aditya. Witness accounts painted a picture of heated arguments between him and Rohit. In the days leading up to the murder, forensic evidence placed him at the scene. And under intense questioning, he eventually confessed to the crime.
Confessions, though, are rarely simple. Sometimes they're born of genuine remorse, a crushing realization of the magnitude of one's actions. Other times, they're calculated moves, attempts to control the narrative or minimize potential consequences. And often, it's a complex blend of both.
In Aditya's case, it seemed like the weight of his actions, the overwhelming evidence against him, and perhaps a flicker of guilt, all contributed to his confession. But the question lingered: was this a premeditated act, a carefully planned execution of a rival, or was it a crime of passion, an impulsive act fueled by a moment of uncontrollable rage?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? And it's one that the courts grappled with during the trial. To understand the answer, we need to delve deeper into Aditya's psyche, into the specific circumstances that might have pushed him over the edge.
So let's do just that. Let's rewind the clock. Piece together the events leading up to that fateful night, and try to understand what drove Aditya to commit such a horrific act.
I think it's important, though, as we embark on this exploration, to remember that while we're analyzing the psychology of a killer, we're also dealing with the tragic loss of a young life. Rohit Kaushik was more than just a victim in a crime. He was a son, a friend, a colleague, a person with dreams and aspirations that were cut brutally short. Let's approach this conversation with sensitivity and respect for all those affected by this tragedy.
Absolutely. And while we seek to understand the motives behind this crime, let's not lose sight of the very real human cost. It's a reminder that actions have consequences, and that even amidst the allure of success and ambition, the choices we make can have irreversible repercussions. Now, let's get back to Aditya. What can you tell us about his background, his personality, the factors that might have contributed to his descent into violence?
Well, based on the reports and psychological evaluations, Aditya seems to have been grappling with a deep sense of inadequacy and insecurity. He constantly compared himself to Rohit, both professionally and in terms of Priya's affections. This constant comparison, coupled with a perceived lack of recognition for his own efforts, likely fueled his resentment.
It's interesting you mentioned that sense of comparison. Social media, with its curated portrayals of success and happiness, can often exacerbate these feelings of inadequacy. Was that a factor in this case?
It's certainly possible. We know that social media can create unrealistic expectations and fuel a constant need for validation. And in a world like the Mumbai fitness scene, where image is everything, the pressures to achieve and maintain a certain physique and lifestyle can be immense. It wouldn't be surprising if Aditya felt overwhelmed by these pressures and saw Rohit as a living embodiment of everything he felt he lacked.
So we have this potent mix of professional rivalry, romantic rejection, and perhaps a dash of social media-induced insecurity, all swirling around Aditya. What was the final trigger? What pushed him over the edge?
To understand that, we need to look at the events leading up to the murder. Reports suggest that in the days before the crime, Aditya and Rohit had several heated arguments, both at the gym and outside. Witnesses describe Aditya as increasingly agitated, almost obsessed with Rohit's every move.
It's as if his jealousy had morphed into something more sinister, a consuming rage that he could no longer control.
Exactly. And then there's the final straw. The incident that seems to have been the catalyst for the murder, according to witnesses. Just hours before the crime, Aditya saw Priya and Rohit laughing together in the gym. It seems this seemingly innocuous moment sent him spiraling, confirming his worst fears and igniting a murderous rage within him.
It's a chilling reminder of how quickly emotions can escalate, how a seemingly insignificant event can trigger a chain of events with devastating consequences.
It's also a reminder that we never truly know what's going on inside another person's mind. Behind the facade of success, charm, or even normalcy, there can be hidden struggles, simmering resentments, and a capacity for violence that we might never suspect. It's a stark reminder that we all have a responsibility to be aware of our own emotional state and to seek help when needed. Bottling up feelings of anger, resentment, or jealousy can lead to dangerous consequences.
You know, it's easy to judge Aditya's actions from the outside. But I'm curious from a psychological perspective, what happens in those moments leading up to an act of violence? Is there a complete break from reality? Or is it a more gradual descent, a series of choices that ultimately lead to a point of no return?
That's a fascinating question and one that researchers have been exploring for decades. There's no single answer as each case is unique, but what we often see is a process of cognitive distortion where the individual's thoughts and perceptions become increasingly skewed by their intense emotions.
So in Aditya's case, his jealousy might have warped his view of reality, making him see Rohit as a genuine threat, even if that wasn't objectively true.
Exactly. His mind might have been consumed by thoughts of revenge, fueled by a sense of injustice and a desire to reclaim what he felt had been taken from him. In those moments, rational thinking often goes out the window, replaced by a primal urge to act, to strike back.
It's almost like a switch flips in the brain, and the person is no longer in control of their actions.
Not necessarily a switch, but more like a gradual erosion of self-control. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational decision-making, becomes overwhelmed by the emotional centers, like the amygdala. In that state, the individual is more likely to act impulsively driven by their base instincts rather than logic or reason.
It's a chilling thought to imagine the part of our brain responsible for keeping us in check being hijacked by our emotions.
It is. But it's also important to remember that while our biology plays a role, we're not simply puppets of our emotions. We still have a degree of agency, a capacity to choose how we respond to those feelings. And that's where things like emotional regulation and coping mechanisms come in.
That's where therapy and support systems can be crucial, right?
Yeah.
Having someone to talk to help process those difficult emotions before they become overwhelming.
Absolutely. Talking about our feelings, whether it's with a therapist, a friend, or a family member, can help us gain perspective to DAC, challenge those distorted thoughts, and develop healthier ways of coping. It's like having a pressure valve for our emotions, preventing them from building up to a dangerous level.
In Aditya's case, it seems like he lacked those healthy outlets. He bottled up his feelings, allowing them to fester and ultimately explode in a horrific act of violence.
And that's a tragedy on multiple levels. Not only did Rohit lose his life, but Aditya's own life is now irrevocably changed. He'll spend years, perhaps even the rest of his life, behind bars, grappling with the consequences of his actions.
It's a sobering reminder of the destructive power of unaddressed emotions and the importance of seeking help when we're struggling. But let's shift gears for a moment. You mentioned earlier that confessions can be complex. I'm curious, what are some of the factors that might have influenced Aditya's decision to confess? Was it purely a matter of overwhelming evidence? Or could there have been other motives at play?
That's a great question. Confessions, as we've discussed, are rarely straightforward. There's often a complex interplay of psychological factors at work. In Aditya's case, the evidence against him was certainly compelling. But beyond that, there could have been a sense of relief in finally admitting to what he had done, a way of releasing the burden of guilt and shame he was carrying.
Almost like a cathartic release. A
Oh.
way of acknowledging the gravity of his actions and beginning to face the consequences.
It's possible. There might also have been a subconscious desire for punishment, a need to atone for what he had done. In some cases, individuals who commit violent acts experience a deep sense of remorse and believe they deserve to be punished.
It's a complex and often paradoxical aspect of human psychology, the capacity for both immense cruelty and profound regret.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that even within the mind of someone who has committed a horrific act, there can be a mix of conflicting emotions, rage, guilt, shame, even a twisted sense of love or loyalty.
In this case, it seems like Aditya's love for Triya, if you can even call it that, became distorted and ultimately destructive.
Yeah.
His obsession with her, his inability to accept her rejection, played a key role in fueling his rage.
It's a classic example of what we call limerence, an intense infatuation that often borders on obsession. In limerence, the individual's thoughts and feelings become fixated on the object of their affection to the point where it consumes their entire being. And rejection, as in Aditya's case, can be experienced as an unbearable blow, triggering intense feelings of anger, despair, and even a desire for revenge.
It's a reminder that love, in its purest form, should be about respect, acceptance, and a willingness to let go.
Yeah.
When it becomes possessive, controlling, or fueled by obsession, it can turn into something dangerous and destructive.
Absolutely. Healthy relationships are built on a foundation of mutual trust, respect, and open communication. When those elements are missing, love can easily morph into something toxic and harmful.
And in this case, that toxicity led to a tragic loss of life, leaving a trail of shattered lives and unanswered questions in its wake.
It's a heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences that can arise when love turns sour. But it's also an opportunity to reflect on the importance of healthy relationships, emotional well-being, and the need to seek help when we're struggling with difficult emotions.
Those are powerful takeaways.
Yeah.
As we delve deeper into the legal proceedings of this case, I'm curious to explore how the court grappled with these complex psychological factors. Did they acknowledge Aditya's emotional turmoil? Or did they focus solely on the act itself, the cold, hard facts of the crime?
That's a crucial question, and one that often highlights the challenges of reconciling legal justice with the nuances of human behavior. The law, by its very nature, seeks to establish clear boundaries to define right from wrong. But human emotions are rarely black and white. They exist on a spectrum influenced by a multitude of factors that can be difficult to quantify or prove in a court of law.
So how do we balance the need for accountability with the recognition that human actions are often driven by complex and sometimes irrational emotions?
That's the ongoing debate, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. In Aditya's case, the court ultimately had to decide whether his actions were premeditated, a carefully planned act of murder, or whether they were driven by a sudden and uncontrollable fit of passion, what the law often refers to as a crime of passion.
That distinction is crucial, right? Because a crime of passion, while still a serious offense, is often viewed as less culpable than a premeditated act carrying a potentially lighter sentence.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky, because how do you truly determine what's going on inside someone's mind? How do you prove or disprove the existence of a sudden and overwhelming emotional state?
It seems like a slippery slope trying to quantify something as subjective and nuanced as human emotion.
It is. And that's why cases like this often spark intense debate, with legal experts and psychologists weighing in on the complexities of intent, motive, and the role of emotions in criminal behavior.
So in Aditya's case, how did the court ultimately rule? Did they buy the crime of passion defense? Or did they view his actions as a calculated act of revenge?
Well, the trial was a media sensation, with every detail of the case dissected and debated in the public eye. The prosecution argued that Aditya's actions were premeditated, pointing to the history of animosity between him and Rohit, the heated arguments leading up to the murder, and the brutal nature of the attack itself.
So they were painting a picture of a cold, calculating killer, someone who had carefully planned out his revenge.
Precisely. The defense, on the other hand, tried to humanize Aditya, portraying him as a man driven to the breaking point by jealousy and despair. They argued that the sight of Priya and Rohit together had triggered a momentary lapse in judgment, an uncontrollable surge of rage that had led to the fatal stabbing.
So they were essentially arguing that his emotions had hijacked his rational thinking, leading him to act in a way that he wouldn't have otherwise.
That was their main line of defense. They brought in expert witnesses to testify about the nature of jealousy, the powerful emotions it can evoke, and the potential for it to lead to impulsive acts of violence.
It's fascinating to see how psychology and law intersect in these types of cases. It's
Okay.
almost like two different languages trying to communicate, each with its own set of rules and interpretations.
It is, and it's often a delicate balancing act, trying to ensure that justice is served, while also acknowledging the complexities of human behavior.
So how did the jury ultimately interpret the evidence? Did they find Aditya guilty of premeditated murder? Or did they accept the crime of passion defense?
After weeks of testimony, deliberation, and intense media scrutiny, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty. They rejected the crime of passion defense, finding that Aditya's actions, while undoubtedly fueled by intense emotion, were ultimately a deliberate act of revenge.
So in the eyes of the law, Aditya's emotional turmoil, however real and overwhelming it might have been, was not enough to mitigate the severity of his crime.
It's a stark reminder that even in cases where emotions run high, we're still held accountable for our actions. The law recognizes that humans are emotional beings, capable of making terrible mistakes in the heat of the moment. But it also draws a line, a distinction between impulsive acts and calculated choices. And in Aditya's case, the jury ultimately determined that he had crossed that line.
And what was the sentence? How long will Aditya be spending behind bars?
Aditya Mehra was sentenced to life in prison, a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and that even the most intense emotions can't justify taking a life.
Life in prison, a heavy price to pay for a crime fueled by jealousy and rage. It's a tragic outcome for everyone involved, for Rohit, whose life was cut tragically short, for Priya, who was left to grapple with the trauma and guilt of being caught in the crossfire, and for Aditya himself, who will spend years, perhaps decades, contemplating the choices that led him to this point.
It's a reminder that while we can't always control the emotions that arise within us, we can choose how we respond to them. We can choose to seek help, to talk to someone, to find healthy outlets for our anger and frustration.
And it's a reminder that building healthy relationships based on respect, communication, and a willingness to let go is crucial for our own well-being and for the safety of those around us.
Absolutely. This case, with all its tragedy and complexity, serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of unaddressed emotions and the importance of seeking help when we're struggling. It's a message that we all need to hear, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, always a path toward healing and growth.
It's a sobering thought, and a reminder that we all have a responsibility to look for those signs in our own lives and in the lives of those around us, to intervene before it's too late.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things that struck me about this case is the role of the gym environment itself. Gyms,
Yeah.
especially those catering to a high-performance clientele, can be incredibly competitive. There's
Yeah.
constant pressure to push harder, to achieve more, to be the best.
And that pressure, while it can be motivating for some, can also be incredibly toxic for others.
Exactly, and in Aditya's case, it seems like that pressure, combined with his own insecurities and the perceived threat from Rohit, created a perfect storm. It's not to say that gyms are inherently dangerous places, but I think it's important to be mindful of the potential for unhealthy competition and the need to foster a more supportive and inclusive atmosphere.
I think that's such a valuable point. We often talk about the importance of physical health, but mental and emotional well-being are just as crucial, especially in environments that can be as intense as gyms. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways you'd like our listeners to remember?
Well, I think there are several. First, the importance of recognizing and addressing unhealthy emotions, whether it's jealousy, resentment, or anger. Don't let those feelings fester. Talk to someone. Seek professional help if needed. Second, the need to be mindful of the environments we create, whether it's at work, in our social circles, or even in our own families. Are we fostering a culture of support and healthy competition? Or are we inadvertently breeding toxicity and resentment? And finally, the reminder that even amidst the allure of success, ambition, and the pursuit of our goals, we must never lose sight of our humanity, kindness, empathy, and compassion should always be our guiding principles.
Beautifully said. Those are powerful words to carry with us, and I want to thank you for joining me on this emotionally charged journey. It's been a fascinating exploration of the dark side of human nature, but also a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and our capacity for growth and change.
It's been a pleasure as always, and I hope this conversation encourages our listeners to be more mindful of their own emotional well-being and the well-being of those around them, because in the end, it's our connections with each other, our capacity for empathy and understanding that truly make us human.
And before we sign off, A reminder to our listeners to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle on your favorite podcast platform, and check out our YouTube channel for more deep dives into the world of true crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the dark side with us.